Namaste and welcome to another episode of Itihasdhir. The book that we're going to be discussing today is called The Mahatma's Manifesto and it is written by Mr. Rajesh Talwar. So, welcome to Itihasdhir.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you, Aditya. You are doing the show, and your names resemble each other, so that is good. That's an interesting coincidence, or is it not a coincidence?
We're just long
It
lost
is a
siblings.
coincidence.
Okay,
We're long lost siblings who've just found our ways back into each other's lives in this, in this birth.
sure, sure, sure. Well, I guess sometimes people must be confusing also that I
Hmm.
spoke to Aditi.
Oh, a
Oh no,
lot.
spoke to Aditya. Huh? Oh,
So
something.
it happens a lot that people say, "Oh, you're siblings because your names are so similar, and your parents just didn't bother to put in a lot of effort." But at this point, we have just stopped correcting them because it's too much energy as well. So we just go on with it. We say, "Yeah, we are siblings."
Sure, 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 sure. Well, good to see you both.
So it's good to have you here with us. So, sir, we'll start with the questions. So, I wanted to ask you, can you explain to us what is the Hind Swaraj movement?
Yeah, well, Hind Swaraj is a kind of a written in a manifesto style when
Okay.
Gandhi had already built up his reputation in South Africa because of all the great work he did there. And then he wrote Hind Swaraj as a kind of manifesto opposing imperialism,
Okay.
which is good. But there are lots of ideas in it which are retrograde, which are patriarchal, which should be discarded. Uh, of course, Gandhi did a lot for the country. His contributions need to be deeply valued. But at the same time, we need to discard what is useless, what is troublesome. And so a few years ago, a friend of mine who uh, is a great lover of Gandhi, he presented me a copy of Hind Swaraj, which had been edited by Suresh Sharma, a historian who used to work with the CSDS, Center for Study of Developing Societies. So out of curiosity, I picked it, and I didn't think that there would be anything very troublesome for me. But when I started reading it, I got perplexed, I got shocked, I felt outrage. And so then I wondered, I said, am I the only person who's feeling this way about one of the books which Gandhi wrote much before he wrote My Experiments with Truth, but a book which he said till the end, he said, my vision is laid out in this book. So he never disavowed the contents of Hind Swaraj. When I looked at it, I was so upset. I thought, let me check. Am I the only person feeling this way, or are there others? So the best way, of course, was to go to Amazon. I went to Amazon and I looked down the reviews, and they were all five-star reviews, all of them praising Gandhi like anything and saying this book will change your life. This book is fantastic. The book is great, and not a word of criticism.
Mm.
So that upset me because I thought, why should we be so uncritical? And Dr. Ambedkar actually pointed this out, this trouble with the Indian mentality, that on the one hand, we are a very deeply spiritual people, but sometimes we bring that reverence to areas where uh, we should not. So uh, just because it's Gandhi doesn't mean everything he said is sacred, everything he said is right. And actually, in Hind Swaraj, there is
Yes.
so much, so very much that is uh, just not palatable in this modern age, which deserves to be discarded. But the sad thing is that there is hardly ever any criticism that we hear, not from Indian writers, not from Indian historians, and not from the West, certainly. So that's the background to the Hind Swaraj and why I came to write this book.
So this was your, this is what motivated you and made you talk about it after such a long time, like
Yes,
since it
yes.
was penned down. Yes, fair enough. And so what is the need for the book? Like there have been so many discussions which are centered around the Hind Swaraj Manifesto. Of course, there's not much which is written about it. But there are people like, some people compare it to the Bhagavad Gita, and they compare the the knowledge that Gandhi imparts to the knowledge of Sri Krishna that he imparted to Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita. So, like, you've taken quite a gargantuan task in your hand, because now you have to bring forth these truth to people, and a lot of them would not be very happy about it.
Yes. In fact, when I circulated a couple of reviews that came out to some of my WhatsApp group, which is my college group and my school group, I saw some people were deeply offended. So this is a book which is likely to cause a lot of offense. And since I have read the Gita also very carefully, I think it's an insult to the Gita, which is a timeless, profound document, to compare Gandhi's Hind Swaraj with that document. Uh, and I wish people would read it, because there are so many troublesome things. For example, just take something which is very topical these days, the issue of vaccines. When we had COVID, there were many people who were opposed to vaccine. Mr. Trump has also recently appointed somebody who is opposed to vaccines. But even those people were not opposed to immunization efforts in general. Now, Gandhi, in Hind Swaraj and elsewhere, he says vaccination is a barbarous practice. It is so barbarous that it is not even used by the most savage races in the world. He says it's better to die, you know. So these are, I'm not putting words into his mouth. This is what he said. It's better to die rather than to take this obnoxious substance. Uh, Now, the WHO, since I've worked with the UN for many years, I've been involved in immunization programs. They calculate that there are at least 150 million lives that have been saved as a result of vaccination and immunization efforts post World War II. Now, Gandhi would have all those people die. And I think the story is well known about how he refused Kasturba to receive life-saving drugs because he
Yes.
said, no, no, I'm just going to do Ramdhun. She will be fine. And I don't want these devilish substances to be injected into her. And this is just one example. There are numerous other examples of very archaic, patriarchal, rotten ideas in Hind Swaraj. There are some wonderful ideas as well, I should say. But those ideas are fewer than the ones that deserve to be discarded.
So we see a growing sort of reverence, or I don't know, there's a lot of money that has been injected in sort of cultivating an image that we see not only in India but across the world. Even G20 leaders, when they came to India, one of the first acts that all of them did together was to go to Gandhi's resting place and to bow their heads and offer flowers. So, in one sense, we see a growing need to extol Mahatma Gandhi, and on the other hand, there are a lot of so your book talks about, for example, the views that Mahatma Gandhi held on the British Parliament, or we can, in one way, say that he talked about parliamentary democracy in general, where he compares it to a prostitute with the amount of people coming and going into the parliament and sort of yielding power. He compares it to a sterile woman, and he says that it has not done a single thing of its own, a good thing of its own accord. Where you sort of also point out in your book, as if that is a comparison where you're being told that a woman is only as good as she is for bearing children. He talks. We'll see him be a very central figure in the Congress Working Committee in terms of the decisions that are made. But again, there is power without accountability because he isn't in the committee. We see him overrule the election of Subhash Chandra Bose when he declares that Sitaramayya's defeat is my defeat, and he compels him to resign. So how would one reconcile the views that Mahatma Gandhi held about parliamentary democracy, especially the British parliamentary democracy, but parliamentary democracy in general, with the view that we today have where parliamentary democracy can't even function without extolling Gandhi at all?
Yes, actually, I'm reminded of two phrases in the context of Gandhi. One is that you could describe him as a sacred cow, not a sacred cow for the Hindus, but a sacred cow for modern secular society that will not have tolerate anything said against Gandhi. He is just too big in his stature to be touched. And normally you would expect Westerners at least to be a little more critical, but there,
Hmm.
for whatever reasons, they have also held back. Uh, there are various historians who have expressed their views on Hind Swaraj. On the one hand, you have, say, somebody like Suresh Sharma, whose book was gifted to me with CSDS, who is a great admirer, a devotee, a historian, and a devotee of Mahatma Gandhi. On the other hand, you have somebody like Ramchandra Guha. Ramchandra Guha has probably made a cottage industry out of Gandhi. He writes very well, and his books are excellent. But I don't think he would have the courage himself to touch Gandhi. But if you read, he does acknowledge, because even he's too intelligent not to see the crudity. And he does accept that Hind Swaraj has been written very crudely. But he doesn't go beyond that. Now, the people, the historians who are against Gandhi, that is also a very interesting scenario, because on the one hand, you have die-hard communists who say, oh, Gandhi was nothing but a stooge, an imperialist stooge. But who is agreeing with these die-hard communists are the extreme right. They say, yes, exactly right. Gandhi was a stooge. The real people were X, Y, Z. So it's a kind of uh, pact between all the historians to either extol Gandhi or criticize him for the wrong reasons. I mean, you don't have to go and paint him as an imperialist stooge. You just have to read this book. And when you go through the book, you will come across idea after idea after idea, which is reprehensible to anybody who is sensible, who is open-minded, who is critical enough. My image would be that although Gandhi dressed very simply, there's the parable about the emperor's new clothes, you know, that nobody has the courage to point out that the emperor is actually naked. And of course, Gandhi was semi-naked himself. I didn't wear those kind of clothes. But it looks like the world has gathered together, and Gandhi is the moral emperor. Nobody is willing to point out the flaws, to point out to things he said, the things he wrote, things he never retracted, by the way, uh, and accept that, it's time we look, it's time we look at what he said and wrote critically.
So, speaking of also analyzing Gandhi critically, what I find more appalling is his views on marriage and women.
Sure.
Like his entire, like, I mean, one would feel very happy when he says that, women should be the queens of households. But instead they're wandering in the streets, or they're slaving away in the factories, and then you continue reading, and then basically the queens of the household are always supposed to cover their heads. They're supposed to literally do what the husband bids. Like there was this incident he described where when his wife refused to clean the toilet of a lower caste, he dragged her, and he talks about it very proudly. Like there's not even like, I mean, it was something which he feels was like very justified. Or his very thoughts on marriage, where he's like every thoughtful person should not marry. I mean, he would be a big hit in today's world, I feel. Like given his ideas, you know. So my question that I would like to come down to is that in context of the Hind Swaraj, as well as his life, his views on both women and marriage are like very appalling. And how do you see them? And like, how would what would he have how would he have impacted the society, as it is, like his, because like when we talk of Gandhi, or when we are idolizing him, like we as in, I mean, like the society as a whole, we like to, I mean, before reading the Mahatma's Manifesto, I wasn't aware of this aspect. It's not even mentioned anywhere.
Yes, I think there's a kind of global cover up of the Mahatma's real views, unfortunately, and his views with regard to women. But I don't want to do only Gandhi bashing.
Hmm.
One of my favorite writers, Oscar Wilde, uh, I love one of his quotes. He said the true mark of a sophisticated intellect is to see is to be able to keep two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time. So uh, Gandhi did a lot of good. Gandhi has his greatness. Gandhi showed his courage. There are many things which are laudatory about Gandhi, and I am an admirer of Gandhi. So I am not only a critic, but to the things which you point to, certainly,
Hmm.
I mean, those times were different, but even for those times, his views on the role of women were reprehensible. He never thought that the queen of the household, under his vision, is reporting to the king of the household, which he himself represented when he sort of mistreated Kasturba or almost attempted to throw her out of the house. So possibly, the most reprehensible thing I found in Hind Swaraj was when Gandhi discusses the massacre of the Aborigines in America, in Australia. That for me is something even more shocking than his views on women, his views on parliament, because he says, oh, these people who got slaughtered, they should have demonstrated quiet courage, passive resistance. So it's almost as if he is, washing over the genocide. So if you read it, I had to read it 2 or 3 times to be sure that I hadn't misunderstood it. Uh,
Hmm.
but you have all these woke people, and wokeism is not something I support, but all these woke people, and this is their hypocrisy, that they will not point out to all the serious things which Gandhi was lacking in. Uh, I think I would say there's an old Western called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And
Hmm.
for Gandhi, there is much that is good. There is much that is also great, but there is also a lot which is rotten, and there are parts which are ugly as well.
And said like okay, I just wanted to ask one more thing. Like he says he idolizes going back to the ancient civilization, and he calls it the kingdom of God. But in our ancient civilizations, our married life was called the grihast, and it was so sacred and sanctimonious. So like, do his ideas not contradict with that completely? And it's
Yes,
again the opposition, the opposition. Like, at one hand he's saying that you shouldn't get married. At the other hand, he's like, oh, the good old days, you know?
Yes, 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 yes. So I think he's full of contradictions. He's contradicting himself repeatedly. On the one hand, he says uh, ancient times were great.
Hmm.
And the other hand, he says we should get rid of all the courts. People should just settle their disputes by themselves. If there is any lawyer in the country, he should resign. If there's any judge in the country, he should resign. But he overlooks the fact that in ancient India also, in every civilized society, there has been a system of courts. The only people who don't have courts are people like, or kangaroo courts are people like the Taliban, or like, very cruel dictatorships where by executive order people are massacred or killed. Uh, so, uh, the Hind Swaraj is full of contradictions. I mean, you go through page after page and it's contradiction after contradiction, full of paradoxes. What is interesting is also that on the one hand, Gandhi has a very patriarchal attitude towards women. On the other hand, his persona is not very macho, and that is to his credit. In fact, he gives credit to his mother for influencing him towards the non-violent struggle. So what happens is, I believe, in ancient times also, when the woman, she wanted to register a protest, she would go on a fast. When a woman finds that her husband is not bringing her the money to take care of the family, to take care of the kids, where he is drinking up all the money, or when he doesn't get her a sari on a special occasion, then she also goes on a fast. She stops eating. In the beginning, the husband says, okay, she stopped eating. I don't care. But then she stops cooking also. And Gandhi actually harnessed this great way in which women resisted, and he used it as a political weapon. So, on the one hand, so I would not put Gandhi in the category of, the standard feudal patriarchal people. He is influenced by women. He is also himself not of the macho style, but of a more feminized male. But despite that, he is also very patriarchal deep within. So he's a complex man. Uh, there is the good, there is the bad, and there is the ugly.
Okay.
And in fact, you mentioned this wonderful anecdote where you've talked about how earlier he commanded Kasturba to not go out of the house without his permission. And then she has to go to the temple with her mother in law. And she comes back to find him angry. And it is one of the first times that he loses a major fight, and that too by sheer force of logic, and he has to abandon the ideas that he had. And he does say that a lot of his non-violent ideas have come from his wife Kasturba's influence. So there's that as well. So, sir, there is another contradiction that came to my mind. This actually stood out to me more than anything else. We've seen, we've seen Mahatma Gandhi in Johannesburg. He's been mistreated. He's been thrown out of a train. We've seen racial discrimination at times against him, um, and he has fought against that. In the Indian context, he sat on satyagrahas, which have terribly terrified the British at times, where they've written to each other, asking them to somehow break his fast or to feed him without him knowing, feed him through his intravenous uh, diet, uh, glucose or something like that. On the other hand, there's this picture where the Second Boer War is going on, and he's organized Indian Ambulance Corps for uh, the to support the cause of the British, because, as you say, he decided that he owed allegiance to the cause of the British and needed to demonstrate his loyalty to the empire. or we see that he has arranged Indian volunteers to suppress the Zulu rebellion against the tax that had just been put. He reportedly disparaged his fellow inmates in South Africa when he was incarcerated, and he calls them so-called kafirs, living like animals per se. Uh, so that uh, I mean, a lot of what he said, for example, during the Mopla violence or uh, during the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, as you mentioned, which is very close to what he says for the Australian invasions, etc. as well. Um, for the invasion of UK by Hitler, when he asked man, woman, and child to sacrifice their lives but not pick up arms, how does one reconcile that? Because on the one hand, he's always been the person who's helped the downtrodden, the Harijan of the society, the racially discriminated, the one discriminated through caste. On the other hand, there's this information that is completely new to a reader. How does that, and it isn't taught in history textbooks again, most of it. So how does one reconcile that?
I think that Gandhi kept on learning, but uh, and changing his mind throughout his life. So, for example, if you see Gandhi's views on caste, there are at least 7 times he changes his mind on the issue of caste. But Gandhi himself never said, I was wrong, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You know, sometimes he says that, like he pointed out that Kasturba was right. But in various views, which he expressed, in various things which he did, he doesn't make it clear that I was wrong in the past. My views on caste were wrong. My views on so he changes, but he doesn't disavow the past. I think there may be some ego. Very often, elderly people in a family, they realize they have done something wrong. They've mistreated one of their children, or they mistreated the daughter-in-law, and they realize, but they're not willing to say it. So I'm not sure if Gandhi had been quizzed, what he would have had to say uh, with regard to the Zulu rebellion, the Boer, and things like actually being an apologist for the genocidal invaders in the US and in Australia. Uh, very often he had these views, and when the contradiction was pointed out to him, he would accept it. That yes, but he won't change his views at the same time. So he's a good, bad, ugly, and also very, very contradictory. But I think we need to take part of the blame for it. As Ambedkar writes somewhere, he says, the devotional aspect is very good with regard to spirituality, because when you submit to a supreme power, uh, there is a kind of spiritual transformation. But in the normal world, in the political world, in the social world, we should not deify people. And unfortunately, in India, we have a tendency to deify people. Now, and people talk about there's this expression Modi Bhakt. And yes, they are Modi Bhakts. If you say anything against Mr. Modi, they will jump down your throat and say, why did you say this? Why did you say this? Modi did not do this. Modi could not do anything wrong. But there are also Rajiv Gandhi Bhakts who will support Rajiv Gandhi like anything. There are Rahul Gandhi Bhakts. There are Sonia Gandhi Bhakts. We are a nation of Bhakts, and even the secular people, the so-called secular people, they are also completely like in the cast in the mold of Bhakts, that only secular. We hate Modi, we hate the right wing. So it's a kind of preponderance of, uh, just a kind of emotional, devotional attitude, not looking at things critically. But as a nation, we cannot grow In fact, Gandhi pointed to our past, our glorious past. And one of the great things about our glorious past, which Amartya Sen mentions in his book, The Argumentative Indian, is that in ancient India, there used to be great arguments, and people would be watching those arguments. They would be listening to rebuttals, point by point rebuttals. So they had that open mind. We seem to have lost that open mind. We are no longer critical. We are no longer saying, okay, let's not be a bhakt of anyone. If we have to be a bhakt, let's only be a bhakt of the supreme power in the religious world. But otherwise, let's not be a bhakt of Kejriwal, of Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, Modi, anybody else. You think of it and you find when I remember Sanjay Gandhi was very popular, uh, there was a historian who had written a book called The World's Wisest Wizard, Sanjay Gandhi. There was a High Court judge who had written a hagiography of Indira Gandhi. So on the one hand, we have this bhakti system, over bhakti in the political arena, in the social arena. On the other hand, we have this huge problem of chamchagiri. So we need to get rid of both. If we are really going to come out of the colonial power, colonial mindset, we have to get rid of chamchagiri. Sometimes I think that we should introduce a PhD in chamchagiri studies in the university, because there is so much chamchagiri going on everywhere, whether it's in the arena of politics, whether it's uh, in the film industry. I used to attend some actors' parties, and I found it so strange that you have all these superstars and you have 4 or 5 very well dressed people who are standing next to them. And then I said, why is every actor surrounded by 4 or 5 people who cannot be recognized? And I was told that those are the chamchas. Every actor needs to have 4 or 5 people around him. So Gandhi also had a lot of chamchas, but his chamchas continue till this day. We need to chamchasify ourselves. We need to get rid of this mindset, of my bap. But there are good signs. Uh, the Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul, he came to India in 1962 and he was quite despairing. He said, I find that people are still cast in the fatalistic Gandhi mode. But then many years later, I think in the late 1980s, he wrote India, A Million Mutinies Now, in which he said, now the old order is crumbling. So we are emerging. And I see this change reflected in many places I go to. When I go to a shop earlier, maybe 20 years ago, to have a cup of tea, the people would shout at the waiter, "Oi, Chotu, idhar aana." They would, curse him. Now there's more respect. The barista guy also dresses smartly. The Costa guy or woman, they will put their stuff in their bag. So slowly, slowly, dignity is seeping in. Chamchagiri uh, is taking a back seat, and I think the emergence of the private sector may be having something to do with it. Uh, but I think I may have gone off track a bit.
So I have one question to follow up. You said that Gandhi did, talk about our glorious past that we've had as a civilization, but then we also again see him tell us that, history is something that you shouldn't study, because then again he has that view that it will divide the society, it will teach people too much, maybe people will realize that there are fault lines which he tries to cover up throughout his life. And we will ask you about, you've covered uh, 4 to 5 brilliant points. A lot of, I mean, the first 2 points are something that a lot of people talk about, but then there are a lot of points that you have covered in your book that people do not talk about when it comes to why he tried to gloss over fault lines. But then there is still this view that, he says that history is something that you shouldn't study.
Yes, I think he overstretches the point. I would not
Mm,
disagree with somebody who would say that let's not keep on talking about Hindu massacres, which happened in the ancient times or during medieval times. I would not disagree with that. We don't have to go over it again and again. We just have to
mm,
be aware of it. So uh, we don't also need to be taught a history which represents Muslims in a very violent light. We are living together as a community. Let's be kind to each other. So I think the whole issue is one of sensitivity, but at the same time, we cannot whitewash what happened. So I was personally very pleased, for example, when Aurangzeb Road was renamed, uh, because Aurangzeb, to my mind, was a very cruel man, very cruel emperor. He was cruel not only to the Hindus, he was also cruel to the minority Muslim communities. So he was overall very cruel. We shouldn't have a road named after him. But I thought it was very sensible and a good gesture to rename that road as APJ Kalam, another Muslim, somebody whom across religion everybody can respect. So uh, so I think we should not whitewash the past, but we should not also, I agree with Gandhi to that limited extent. Gandhi would rather we forget the past. I don't think we should forget it. I think we should teach it. And I don't think we should teach it in the sanitized way in which historians, leftist historians, have been doing it. We need to uh, accept that there was great cruelty. But at the same time, it's just a matter of handling things sensitively, keeping the fabric of society intact, allowing for expression of all kinds of views, but not being so woke that the minority, for fear of offending the minority, you don't speak the truth. But um, at the same time, no Hindu triumphalism. That is the kind of mature society we should become.
So something that I think you cover in your book as well in terms of quoting Ambedkar, when Ambedkar also talks about this, I think it is the same thing that he's saying, or he tries to say that when he talks about 2 to 3 rulers who've been very cruel, and he names Aurangzeb, he names bin Qasim, and he says that these are not rulers that are Indian per se; these are invaders who've come to India. And so I think a major problem that has arisen is that we've started teaching people that they're Indians. And as soon as people do realize that their cruelty has nothing to do with them, it has nothing to reflect on them, it is, false worship of idols that should not have been cast as idols in the first place on any side whatsoever will also stop. And somewhere I think there would be a balance in society as well where the fabric isn't being torn apart.
Sure, 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 sure. I agree with you.
So I have a question as well. Throughout the book, there are examples, where we can see that Gandhi has a lot of issues with the modern civilization. Like his entire headspace goes in the direction that wherever there's civilization, it's going to lead to evil in man, in society, so much so that like he feels that like railways accentuate your bad behavior. And compared, like he'll compare villages and towns to like big cities. And he says that the cities are connected with buses and trains, and this is the reason for all things evil. um aren't these ideas so outdated in today's world? I mean, machinery and innovation, they have taken an unprecedented pace. They are integral for our very system. I mean, going by that logic, even we are evil because we're using technology.
Sure, 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 sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think Gandhi is completely, he's He's like a primitive man with a hatred for any kind of technology uh, beyond the, very basic technology. Although he uses that technology himself in his life. He spoke on the radio, uh,
Wristwatch.
and he finally did take medicine himself when it came to the crunch. So those paradoxes, those contradictions are there, and he hates cities, he hates machinery, he hates factories. It's He doesn't see that, he doesn't even want science to be taught in school. So physics, chemistry, biology, he says these should not be taught. Only moral teaching should be uh, given in school. Uh, so in fact, when I was with the UN, I worked in many countries, um, Somalia, Liberia, Afghanistan, East Timor. But my last posting was in Afghanistan. And I found Gandhi useful in one way and also absurd in another way. Because in many of these countries, we were negotiating with warring factions. And Gandhi himself was a great negotiator. When he, in his practice in South Africa, in the majority of cases, he did not win the cases. He just brought both the parties to a settlement, to a compromise. So he was a great arbitrator. He managed to get people to see the other person's point of view and to settle their disputes. So, and that's a very useful thing if you're working in peacekeeping, which is the focus area for myself when I worked with the UN. At the same time, Gandhi reminded me of the Taliban because the Taliban also have the same idea. All this science, physics, chemistry is not needed at all. All you need to do is give moral instruction. So, how is Gandhi so different? And with regard to his opposition to science, uh, I think if we had followed Gandhi, many people, say that we made a great mistake when we were socialist under Nehru, and they are right because we didn't make enough progress. It was only after the reforms introduced by Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh that our economy really took off. But at the same time, we failed to consider that if we had gone the Gandhi way, we would have been in a terrible, terrible state. We would have been partitioned multiple times. I mean, we would have lost all the wars with Pakistan because Gandhi didn't believe in having a defense industry, he didn't believe in any industry. So it's very fortunate that we did not follow Gandhi. Every year, around the time his anniversary comes, death anniversary, or when he was uh, born, people take out articles in all the national newspapers saying how Gandhi is still relevant today. But nobody talks about his irrelevance, how he had already become irrelevant post independence, how everybody is just paying lip service. If they really went to his real ideas, uh, nobody seems to examine them either. So it's really uh, Gandhi, the moral emperors, who nobody is willing to expose. Because either you're an enemy of Gandhi or you're a devotee. Uh, you cannot, um, in our society, for many people, you cannot take a more balanced view.
So, in your book, as I was saying earlier, you've highlighted a lot of personal reasons that Gandhi believes in the Hindu-Muslim relationships as he does. Uh, you've highlighted personal reasons where being a Hindu, he needs to inculcate certain amount of trust in the minorities. You've talked about historical reasons where you know there has been certain part of history that he would like us to gloss over to for the fabric to remain intact. Uh, but then you've also interestingly talked about the role that education sort of plays in his understanding of those relations in terms of his views that science shouldn't be taught and the the literacy levels in the different sections of the society. Could you talk briefly about that as well? Because I found that idea very interesting.
Yes, well, Gandhi speaks and writes very well in English, uh, but he doesn't want anybody else to learn English. His grandniece Manu, who did a lot of seva for him, he told her, "You should not learn English. You should not learn physics, chemistry." She wanted to go within Pakistan to some university at that time to study. And Gandhi said, "No, you should not go there. You should stay with me. What is the use of all these qualifications?" So Gandhi doesn't seem to realize that he has this stature because he himself has these qualifications. If he had been not been a barrister at law, if he had not had all those qualifications, if he hadn't had that experience, then he would not have been respected. So Manu ultimately, I find it very sad. I find it very tragic to see an elderly person bullying a young girl who just has innocent ambitions of acquiring a degree, and he's telling her this is not necessary. So he's not very respectful of her. And of course, as a young girl, she is no match for this mature man. And he convinces her, and she writes that he guided me in the right direction. But I feel very sad when anybody uses any kind of authority, and Gandhi used his moral authority, moral in inverted commas, far too many times. Uh, the genuine saints, they don't do that. Uh, it is reprehensible to accuse the Aborigines who got massacred of cowardice. People who are, if you are really courageous, you will not accuse people of cowardice very easily because it's a serious allegation to make. When a community is slaughtered and you accuse them of cowardice, that makes it, almost absurd. So Gandhi's views on education were contradictory, paradoxical, given that he himself uh, read so many books, but he didn't advise anyone else to do that. Anyone else to read English, study the sciences. In fact, he studied so many books on defecation, on how to cover up he wanted to make India clean. So he was uh, reading scientific books, but he doesn't want anybody else to do it. Uh, Another very strange kind of a view on education.
So, coming out to cleanliness, uh, I just remember this one little, anecdote from the book where Gandhi used to advocate, for a simple ancient lifestyle. He criticized uncleanliness, and his goats used to get baths, and they used to be transported everywhere with him. But then there was also this one incident where I think a single drop of like mango juice had spilled on his loincloth, and he kept on scratching at it. Or the very irony that as much as he criticizes, like going down to my previous question, as much as he criticized the trains for connecting or bringing out evil, he was a frequent traveler by train. And again, the example that you gave, that he wouldn't let Kasturba, his wife, uh, being given a shot of penicillin when she needed it. And it just like all of this immediately to the mind also gives the image of Mother Teresa. Like she would be this great saint who's out there to help people, but she would let them suffer also. Like she would tell everyone to discard, all the luxuries of life while she herself would travel first class. And why are we often taught only half the stories? Like, that is my question. Why are we only taught half the stories while the other half of the story, which is equally as important about these great figures, these great statues, why are those stories hidden? Like, we'll be told, oh, he was a very simple man, but then why would we not say that he was very high maintenance as well? Why is that one part hidden from us and only selective history is taught to us, specifically when it comes to people like this?
Well, I think it's, uh, for example, his experiments of sleeping with young women, married women sometimes with the permission of their husbands, and unmarried women with the permission of their parents to carry out his experiments. There was a big Congress, uh, you know, authority making sure that all this information doesn't go out too far. So the Congress party had a vested interest in creating a certain image of Gandhi. So we can attribute part of not having a proper, complete picture to a cover up. Part of it can be attributed to our own desire not to know the bad things, uh, just to revere the person and to say that, oh, he may have had some strange ideas, but, let's not discuss them. Uh, so that's unfortunate. That, but uh, apart from this, I think there are, people who there is a great swell of opinion in the country, which Naipaul pointed out, which is moving away from archaic Gandhi ideas and who are questioning why we should, just deify him to this extent. Uh, I recently posted uh, a short video about the book on YouTube, and I found that it suddenly got more traction than many other videos. So that makes me think that we are approaching a time where we may become, in some years, sophisticated enough to see that Gandhi had his greatness, but he also had his deep flaws.
And so, in terms of like cleanliness, what Aditi said, she gave the very example, a very excellent anecdote of the mango juice spilling on his loincloth.
Yes, yes,
Um,
yes.
and my question simply is that, how possible was it for a common individual in India or a common poor man in India to replicate the kind of lifestyle that Gandhi advocated for, or that Gandhi himself led? And where would that have led us as a civilization? I know this is a very broad question in terms of where that would have led us, but at least could his lifestyle have been easily replicated? And yes, what would that mean for us today if that were to be followed?
Uh, I think the thing is that uh, Gandhi is appreciated by many people who are against modernity, and certainly modernity has its problems. So it's not that industry doesn't create pollution, air pollution, river pollution, other kinds of pollution. It's not that, uh, you know, uh, the clean life of the countryside has great appeal. So many people, they look to Gandhi as uh, somebody who was looking into the future, where modernity itself would be questioned. But I don't think that's really the case. I think he was just archaic in his thinking. And it just so happens that now it sort of feeds into a narrative of anti modernity, anti industrialization. So if people tried to live as Gandhi did, uh, they would never. I mean, who would bear the suffering? Your children are dying, uh, and they can be treated in the hospital. There is a epidemic and there is a vaccination. Nobody, Gandhi is actually completely irrelevant. He's become like somebody who has been irrelevant for quite some time, but we are just refusing to accept it. He has his good points, his ideas about, getting people to reconcile, about getting your neighbor to not to fight with him. Those are things. but let's also just throw out all the rubbish in Hind Swaraj. If Hind Swaraj had, if you, one of my friends, one a Muslim friend of mine, he once read the Ramayana out to his grandmother, but he changed all the names. So he made Ram Abdul and he made Sita Wahida, and she enjoyed it hugely. And then he told her that this was the Ramayana, and I've played this trick on you. And of course, she was furious. So uh, the same way, if you think of uh, Gandhi, that uh, sorry, what were we talking about? I lost track a bit.
Uh, what would his idea and his kind of lifestyle have led us to as a civilization?
Yes. So I don't think uh, I think he was just he would have driven us into the ground. He was just uh, if you read Hind Swaraj, yes, actually the point I was trying to make was that this Muslim friend of mine did that. So if you actually removed the references and you asked somebody to read Hind Swaraj not as a book by Gandhi, but by somebody else, uh, maybe a Taliban sympathizer or anybody, not necessarily giving any names, uh, but maybe the section on education could be by a Taliban sympathizer, the section on industry could be by some other. If there wasn't this halo, this Gandhi halo surrounding the book, then I think people would have a very different take on it. And I think also, nobody will ever teach Hind Swaraj in school if it is such a great book, which all the world is praising, which all our historians are praising, which people are comparing it to the Gita. Why don't they try and teach it in school? The next day, everybody will say, oh my God, we can't teach this stuff. Because the science teacher, they will say that, oh, we can't teach science, we can't teach physics, we can't teach chemistry. We have to just have moral science in school. So there's a reason why Hind Swaraj will never be taught.
So finally, the last question that I'll be asking is, so what message do you have for your viewers, specifically the young audience who's watching this podcast and who's reading your book? What is the one thing you'd want them to take away from this?
Well, Karl Marx, I'm very critical of Karl Marx also, but there is one statement which I like. And Karl Marx was asked, what is your favorite quote? And he said, it's a Latin quote, omnibus dubitandum. And that is, doubt everything. Doubt everything doesn't mean, of course, that you just become a cantankerous person who's questioning each and everything. I would use that to say, let's be a little more critical minded. Let's have an open debate, and let's not. I would have appreciated Ram Guha more if he had also been forthcoming. He's written so many books on Gandhi. Okay, let's. Why don't he write another book on what I didn't like about Gandhi? And I have no doubt in my mind that he couldn't have liked Hind Swaraj very much.
So we've in this podcast covered a personality that has said amazing things like be the change you want to see in the world. And about him, a lot of things have been said, and we've heard a lot of things like Sarojini Naidu telling Lord Mountbatten that it costs a great deal of money to keep Gandhiji in poverty, or talking about how a lot of Congress people had to dress up as untouchables and fill the trains in
Oh,
to
oh.
travel with him, or to fill the hotels around where he'd stay. So, thank you so much, sir. It was a very important journey for us as readers as well, and I'm sure it will be for the readers of the book, because it talks about it talks extensively about a lot of hidden factors, a lot of hidden facts that we have not yet been able to see. I mean, there have been huge volumes, as you mentioned, Mr. Ram Guha's volumes on Gandhi, India after Gandhi, Gandhi before India. All of them are huge volumes, large books spanning hundreds of pages. And yet, a lot of facts that we've seen in this book, which is a mere, I think, 160 pages if we remove the sections on the actual Hind Swaraj versus those large books. We've seen a lot that has been covered in this book versus a lot that has been missed out in that. I'm sure Mr. Guha would say the same thing, that he's written something and something's been missed here. But then this is a very focused book. So thank you so much for being with us today, sir. It has been a pleasure hosting you at
Thank you, Aditya.
Itihasdhir.
Thank you, Aditi. It's been my pleasure to be with you. And you're right about the number of books. I think Gandhi there are more books about Gandhi than uh, probably any other historical figure. In fact, Ambedkar said that it has become an industry, and that
Hmm.
Gandhi industry still continues. I think we need to, since Gandhi himself was against industry, let's get rid of that.
Fair enough. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for being with us today and and for listening to all of our conversations. And we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you.